Guys, pay very close attention to every single word we discuss in this series. It's based on the cutting-edge cognitive science about your self-regulation and executive functioning. So, it shows up as anxiety, procrastination, overthinking, or difficulty focusing. Most people assume the problem is their thoughts, that they're thinking the wrong things or thinking too much. But these are all different outputs of the same attentional control process. And this video is about how that control process actually works. So I'm going to explain why you can understand what you should do and still not be able to do it. And why your attention keeps snapping back to the same place or the same things even when you try to move it. And why your mind can feel like it's operating on a control mode of its own, separate from what you intend to do. Because under stress, what changes isn't just your thoughts. It's what is controlling your attention and your actions behind those thoughts. And once that executive control process shifts, it changes how everything else gets handled. By the way, if you want to support my channel, please hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications. It really helps. So instead of asking, why am I having these thoughts? The better question is, what is currently controlling my attention and my action? In the moment, the first useful step is simply to notice whether your attention is feeling pulled or chosen. That distinction is one of the earliest signs that your attentional control has shifted. Because this process is constantly evaluating what things mean for you. And it does that through appraisals. It's what we call appraisals. Basically, they're evaluations of what things mean for you. What matters, what's relevant, what might be a problem. And based on those appraisals, your mind activates learned response structures. These are programs. Not just thoughts, but procedural patterns. Automatic structures that produce both thinking and self-evaluation as they run. So when something feels uncertain, threatening, or important, your mind doesn't build a response from scratch. It activates one of these procedural patterns. And once that happens, it begins shaping everything that follows. This is also where people misunderstand beliefs. Because it feels like you have fixed thoughts about yourself, like something is wrong with me, or I can't handle this. But many of these aren't stored truths in your memory. They are just outputs. In other words, they depend on what your mind is currently doing, not just what you believe. They're generated by whichever procedural pattern is currently active, which means the same self-evaluations can keep appearing even when you don't agree with them. Now, these procedures are often self-focused. They turn your attention inward, onto your performance, your state, your thoughts, and this shift can happen very quickly. At first, it feels like a single thought, but it rarely stays that simple. Because once self-referential processing starts, it expands in a structured way. One evaluation activates another related evaluation. One conclusion about yourself pulls in another that fits with it. So instead of a single thought, you get a chain of linked self-referential responses that reinforce each other. That's why it can feel like your mind is building a case against you, because in a way it is. It's running a structured self-referential process that keeps selecting matching self-relevant information and maintaining itself. And at this point, arguing with your thoughts isn't useful, but breaking that chain is. And you do it by shifting to an external task, something that forces sequential attention rather than your internal evaluation. And all of this happens within a limited capacity attentional control system. You have only so much attention and working space available at any moment. So when your self-referential processing becomes active, it starts to consume those attention resources, which means those resources are no longer available for other things, like holding a goal in your mind, focusing on a task, or making decisions. So now there is competition, not between good thoughts and bad thoughts, but between internal self-focused processing and external goal-directed action. And when that internal control process becomes strong enough, it starts to take over. That's why tasks feel harder, not because ability is gone, but because the executive control is already occupied. And the key indicator here is friction. If starting feels harder than continuing, you're not lacking motivation. Your attention resources are already allocated somewhere else. And this is also where overwhelm comes in, because your system's no longer managing one clear goal at a time. Part of it is focusing on the task, part of it is evaluating your performance, and part of it is monitoring for problems. These processes compete for the same limited attentional resources. And as they accumulate, it becomes harder for your executive control to maintain stability. This is where worry comes in. Worry is not just random negative thinking. It's a structured way of keeping attention locked onto something that feels important to you. In some cases, worry narrows experience into a more predictable and controlled stream of thought. But the cost is that it consumes attention capacity, so your system becomes less flexible and more internally occupied. Also, there is monitoring. The mind starts checking for threats, errors, or something wrong. And the more this monitoring runs, the more sensitive the control process becomes. So even neutral signs start to feel meaningful, which keeps the system active. Now, even if you shift your attention away for a moment, that system remains vulnerable because small thoughts, sensations, or cues can trigger the same control patterns again. And once they're triggered, the cycle restarts. That's why it feels like it keeps coming back. Not because one thought is persistent, but because the underlying control process in your mind keeps reactivating itself. So the important point is not preventing triggers, but noticing the restart moment early. The instant your attention shifts from doing to evaluating. Now, distraction works because it temporarily takes over your attentional control. A simple structured task can occupy the system enough to suppress this self-focused, self-referential processing. But it doesn't last because those procedures still haven't changed. So once your attention is freed again or a trigger appears, the control process returns. Like social situations, they intensify this process because social info is tightly linked to your self-evaluation. So your attention turns inward more easily and discrepancies become more active, which feeds directly into the same control process. Finally, there are individual differences between us. Some people shift into this self-focused mode more easily. Others have more stable or less negative self-structures. So the control process is less likely to escalate for them. But the underlying mechanism is the same. So when people describe this as self-control breaking down, that isn't exactly wrong, but it's incomplete. Because control doesn't disappear, it gets captured. Your executive control system is still working, still selecting, still processing, but it's now prioritizing internal self-referential things over external action. And once that happens, everything starts to feel harder, not because your control is gone, but because control is being already used somewhere else. And until that changes, nothing else will feel easy. Remember to subscribe and turn on your notifications for the next video, and I'll see you there. Thanks.